How's it going, everybody? I hope you're having a fantastic day. And since I spent the last video, or a few videos ago, talking about, debuffs and conditions I didn't really like that much and I found were kind of useless, but some people like them and I can appreciate that, and they do have certain, situations, a few battles out of the whole game or a few instances out of the whole game where they're useful, which is fine, but like I said, those are ones that I just didn't find very useful for the majority of the game. Now, I want to talk about buffs that I find useful for the majority of the game. So there might be buffs out there that are very niche, however you want to say that word, or very specific, or only work a couple times because you need to do something special, but these 5 buffs that I'm going to go over are ones that I feel are useful for the entire game, and you should use them almost as much as you can. And of course, we're going to go from the worst. So number 5, the bottom of the list, which some people might kind of think's weird, but I'm putting Charm as number 5. Now, the great things about Charm is it is kind of like a shutdown, so if an enemy is preparing something or might be dangerous, if you get a Charm off, they're not going to do anything. Only problem is once they get hit by the enemy, they, awake. Now, using this information, you can actually uncharm your units pretty easily. If you ever get charmed, just throw a rock at them, or shield bash them, but probably throwing a rock's going to be easier. So, you just throw a rock at your own unit to remove the charm, which is super useful. But yeah, charm is really good. Like I said, charming a cleric and getting it to heal you for a turn or two, or charming a caster. Probably charming melee units is the worst idea, because they're just going to get hit again. But if you charm, a unit that's further away somehow, like, see, charming a cleric, like, if you look at this map, that cleric in the back there, charming that wouldn't be a bad idea, because it ain't going to get hit likely. Well, there are enemy units right there. They're probably just going to slap it. You got to kind of charm a unit that's going to last a couple turns to get the most value. If you only get one turn out of the charm, it's still useful, but that's why it's number 5. It does have very good value, and if you do it right and have the right circumstances, the right conditions, you can get a lot more value out of it than you would otherwise. And then, number 4. Now this one you didn't see this one coming, but I really think Silence is a great debuff. I think it's one of the strongest in the game. Now, obviously, you can't silence, certain units like bosses or like, some have the, protection from silence, but it is so strong because, I don't know about you guys, but I find casters the most annoying thing in the game. I cannot stand enemy casters. I cannot stand AoE attacks. It frustrates me to no end getting spammed by AoE magic on my frontline units. We're in the mosh pit going, and I got 2 or 3 wizards or enchantresses or whatever just back there dunking AoEs on my guys, hitting 3 or 4 of them at a time. And I'm just like, come on. So, Silence is great for those guys because they don't do that no more. And if there is an annoying cleric that keeps doing major heal and healing everybody, you can shut them down for a little while too. I just find Silence to be very useful. There's almost always casters on the map in every battle, so I think having 1 or 2 units capable of Silence every battle would not be a bad idea. Now, that leads me to number 3, which is Weaken. Now, Weaken is great because it lowers the magical defense of a unit. So, any tanky boys, mostly bosses, there are quite a few bosses that are tanky and they're casters. And doing Weaken, if you have a strong, backline, if you have a lot of ranged units, a lot of casters, that's going to give them ample opportunity to come in and do tons of damage. Weaken is super good. I can't imagine why you always wouldn't want to have access to it. Even better than Silence, because even if it's not a tanky boy and you weaken somebody, you could one-shot something. You weaken a cleric, you weaken, a squishy caster, a squishy ranged unit, an archer, you might one-shot them. It's very likely you could if not for sure, two-shot them and take them out of the battle, because Weaken just lowers the defense, the magic defense, that much. And that also, going into that, let's segue into my second, which is Breached, which is the exact same thing as Weaken, except it's for physical defense. Breached is probably something you're going to find early on in the game and you're going to use forever. You're probably going to use it before Weaken, most likely, because, even as early as Chapter 1, you find tanky, bosses, and you start running into Terror Knights, and they become a problem, and you're like, these guys are so tanky, because you don't have them right away, and then dealing with Knights. Any of that stuff, Breach is great. It's going to do the same thing as Weaken. If you get Breach on even if you get Breach on a squishy unit, it's going to allow your melee units to take them out in a turn or two, or if you're physical units, because, you know, bows. But Breach and Weaken are both amazing, and if I would tie them for second, I could, but I find Breach a little more effective than Weaken, just personal preference, so that's why I got to put it number 2. And you guys know, what number 1 is going to be. Of course, it's Poison. It's Poison. Poison's the greatest skill. Sure, you know, if you're playing with specific conditions, or you're doing a no-in-cap run, or you're not playing the game the way it was created and you're putting artificial limitations on how you can play, Poison might not be as useful. Because you have to play differently than the way the game was meant to be played. Because, you know, if you're doing no in-cap, you can't sit there and waste turns for Poison. But basically, what makes Poison so good is its ability to just take out units with a lot of HP. Now, sure, putting Poison maybe on, you know, a 1,000 hit point little squishy isn't a good idea. But that 3,000, you know, HP dragon over there and you don't have a Dragoon, that's great. What, there's a tanky boss? Get it on the boss. It literally does. Now, this is an approximation here, but it's about 30% of their hit points and damage every turn. 20 to 30%. And that can be a lot, because if a unit has 3,000 hit points, you're doing 1,000 HP and damage every turn. And especially if it's a unit you can't get to, like if they're far away and you can poison from a distance, that means at least you're damaging them, even though you can't get in range to damage them. You see what I'm saying? Like, it has its value. And it also, yeah, like, if you're going to put it on a unit like that Pumpkinhead down there, you want to make sure it's going to get used. If you're just going to poison and then just go up and smack everything and kill it, like, unless, I guess, if it's a weapon proc, then whatever. But you got to kind of do it right, and it's got to be on units that are going to, you know, take the damage, that you're going to, like, get the value out of it. At least that's how I see it, because I've had a lot of people tell me how they don't even use Poison, which I can understand why you wouldn't use it in certain situations, like I said, if you're playing with certain rules. But at the end of the day, Poison's damage is so big, and if you can get an AoE Poison off on multiple units, that is so huge. It's just extra damage. It doesn't mean you gotta ignore the unit, it doesn't mean you gotta let it, you know, fester there, and oh, don't hit it, it's poison, it'll die, or it'll die in like 2 or 3 or 4 turns. It just helps you increase your damage, and I would say like damage per second or something, but that's not a thing in this game. But in a lot of games, the more damage you can do every turn, the better, and Poison just allows you to do more damage, but also weaken and breached by lowering defense of an enemy, you can do more damage too. So, but I do think Poison is amazing, and it'll help you so much, especially once enemies start becoming 10 to 20 levels higher than you, and their hit point totals are almost double your hit point totals. You know, when you get into like San Branza and other places that I haven't even got to yet, I can't imagine Poison would have any less value there. So those are my choices, guys. Those are my 5 debuffs that I think are amazing and are useful for the whole game, and you're never going to stop using them, and they are wonderful. And I'm sure there's ones that are even better. Maybe there's ones I missed. Maybe there's, you guys know one that's so useful that I totally am just a crazy person and I'm making my life harder by not using it. So please let me know. Let me know down in the comments below, what debuffs do you use the most? Which ones are your favorite? Which ones do you find always useful? I would love to hear it. And I would definitely, maybe I'll change my mind. Make me a believer. You know, we're going to put that meme up where it says change my mind. You know, what's a good debuff that I'm not using? But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Until then, later guys. Peace out. Have a good one.